You're listening to the Network Podcast. Hello and welcome back. I'm Andy, aka EscoBlades, your host and community developer on Assassin's Creed Initiates. I am ably joined, as always, by senior community developer on Assassin's Creed Unity, Gabe Graziani. Hello.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here, as usual.
Did you enjoy E3?
I did, actually. I had a lot of fun. It was it was stressful, like it usually is, because we have so much. But the reception for Unity was amazingly positive, by and large. It's always E3 is always fun because we only get to show off a tiny part of the game. But it seems like for the last few years anyway, it's been received really well, and this year is no different. So we'll really look forward to unveiling more and more of the game as the months roll on.
Awesome. And we're extremely pleased and honored to be joined by our special guest. He is the lead writer on Assassin's Creed Unity, Travis Stout. Hello.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Cool. We actually, before we started recording, we mentioned that you weren't at E3. One of our community VIPs, Luma, was really hoping to talk to you at the time, but he had to settle for Alex Amancio instead.
Well, you take what you can get.
So as I mentioned before, thank you for joining us again. This is episode 5. We're going to be talking to Travis about all things Assassin's Creed Unity, or at least what we can talk about at this particular point in time. And we're going on the assumption that most of you have already seen the coverage that has come out of E3. We're going to try and drill down on specific topics, mainly Arno and, of course, the French Revolution. So we're going to jump straight into it. Let's talk a little bit about you, Travis. Tell us a bit about yourself before you started working on Unity, what you did beforehand.
Sure. Before I started work on Unity, I was at Undead Labs in Seattle. We made State of Decay, an Xbox Live arcade zombie apocalypse survival game that's sold very well and been very, very popular. Before that, I was at Obsidian Entertainment, and I worked on Fallout New Vegas and all of its DLCs, Alpha Protocol, Dungeon Siege 3, various projects like that. South Park for a little while before I left the studio, and I've been here in Montreal at Ubisoft since March of last year.
Oh, wow. So it's a very robust resume.
I get around a little bit.
Good. And how did you get into writing? Was that sort of like what you always wanted to do, or did you have a few sort of like
very much so, yeah. I got my start writing for tabletop games, Dungeons & Dragons, World of Darkness, things like that. And Obsidian was a really great environment for nurturing designers who wanted to be writers and also writers who wanted to be designers. And there was a lot of really great cross-pollination between the two disciplines. And so I kind of started off doing level design and some systems design, and kind of gradually my focus shifted sort of back and forth over the years of my career. Sometimes I do more design work and less writing. Sometimes I do more writing and less design work. And so for now, I'm very heavily in the writing side.
Okay. And those two sort of disciplines really go hand in hand, writing and level design, or is that just...
They absolutely do, of course, yeah. I mean, everybody who makes video games is a storyteller in some capacity, and the more understanding anyone in any discipline really has of how to tell a story, the structures, the beats, how characters work, motivations, things like that, the stronger the end product is ultimately going to be.
To me, that feels like a really progressive perspective, right? Because I don't feel like I hear that very often. Like, I do hear that mission designers and level designers and writers tend to work very closely together in order to create the final game. But generally, I feel like they're very separate disciplines, and it seems like it would be so much better if we...
It absolutely would be, yeah. I mean, it's really weird to me when I encounter teams and studios that aren't set up that way, because that's just so much what I'm used to, and I think it makes the end product so much better when everybody's on the same page, everybody has the same goals, everybody has the same understanding of what we're all trying to do together, because at the end of the day, we're all in it together. It's a team project, and it doesn't do the game or anybody working on it any good to have writers over here in their sort of ivory tower of story and motivation and theme and high concept, and mission designers over here in their ivory tower of gameplay and mission flow and objective clarity. Like, you need to bring those two together, and really that's where you get really, really special games, I think.
Let's move on sort of like to your approach. And I mean, this is one thing that I know for a fact that our community is always pretty interested in. But in general, it's something I'm personally interested in as well. It's like how you approach sort of like each sort of project that you do. So in this specific case, sort of how you approached the writing for Unity. Can you give us a little bit of maybe sort of like the process, how it happened? Did you get approached by a creative director and say, hey, look, this is what I want to do? Or was it like, this is the sort of you pitch the story and vice versa?
Well, I mean, it's very different on any given project. You know, Fallout New Vegas has a completely different, not just story, but type of story and, different means of how you're going to be able to execute that than a fairly linear story-driven game like an Assassin's Creed project. In this particular example, the project had already been going for, I think, 2 years when they brought me on. So the basic high-level structure of the story had already been very well set and nailed down by the creative directors, editorial, all the senior people on the project had pretty much committed to that. And so when I came on, it's basically my job to execute on that vision. Which is not to say that I have no influence or no impact at all. I mean, certainly if it comes down to the actual writing of a section and we realize, hey, the motivations don't track, or this would be much stronger if it happened this way instead of that way, then, there's always a discussion to be had. And again, it's all very collaborative. I work very closely with the mission designers and talk to them about, okay, well, what are the gameplay goals that you need to get across in this mission, and how does that interact with the story goals that I need to get across, and how can we make something that is really harmonious and does both at the same time, so you don't have the age-old situation of, for example, a character grappling with suddenly having had to kill their first human being, and then the mission ends with a fight with 30 guys, and you just kill all of them, and it doesn't make sense for the story, it doesn't make sense for the gameplay, so you want to try to reconcile any of those issues, and so yeah, it's a lot of sitting down with everybody that's involved in the making of the overarching story, and then drilling down to the very specific beats of each individual sequence, and even within that each individual mission, and then it just comes down to write until it doesn't suck anymore.
I actually have a follow-up question to that, though. So one of the things that is funny to me is, and I think people have a greater understanding with film as to how this sort of works, but do you go through the story and the missions in order, or do you handle them like all at once?
Again, it really depends. Several chunks of the game were written pretty much in order, just because that was how the mission designers prioritized working on them. But just like on a film, what you shoot when is dictated by what sets are available, what locations are available, time of year, time of day. It's the same thing in video games. If the mission designers know that, say, for example, sequence 5 has a big dramatic set piece sequence that has a lot of scripted events and is going to require a lot of custom animation and scripting work to actually to pull it off, then they're going to prioritize that, and they're going to work on that before they get to, say, sequence 2, which is maybe a little bit more of a straight ahead gameplay driven element. So it's we always keep the high level story in mind, but yeah, at any given point you might be working on sequence 6 mission 2, sequence 4 mission 3, and sequence 11 mission 5 at the same time, just because that's what happens to be available, and that's what they need to be able to implement for their next milestone, and be able to get a sense of how the dialogue works with the mission.
See, for me, that seems, maybe that's why I'm not a writer, because that seems like such a real I want to use the word haphazard, which is not really what I'm trying to get across, but it just seems like a weird way of sort of doing things. But then I guess, like you've said, you keep the overarching high level story in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't do something like, well, maybe some writers could, but I'm certainly not that talented. Couldn't do something like this without having the entire story front to back already plotted out at the high level. And okay, in sequence 4 I'm going to assassinate this guy, and that's going to generate this plot point that is teased in sequence 5, but then really feeds into sequence 6, and that's going to in turn unfold into sequence 7, and this and that and the other thing. And then really when it comes down to it, the out of order working, a lot of it is more just the drilling down into the specific details of, okay, well, we know now that this is an assassination mission, and now the mission designers have provided this is what's going to happen, this is where the guy is going to be, this is what's happening around him, so these are the scenes and the elements that we need to bring that together. So yeah, it's It's a lot less haphazard than it sounds. Like we are not Battlestar Galactica. We do have a plan.
Let's move on to Arno himself, who's obviously extremely important to Assassin's Creed Unity, and obviously a character now that everybody is clamoring for information on in the community. So tell us a little bit about him and a little bit about his background.
Well, his background, let's see, I can't really reveal a whole lot of that without spoiling one of the big surprises at the beginning of the game. So I will say that unlike a lot of our previous assassins, he is really more on a quest of redemption. Certainly Ezio was very motivated by revenge. Edward was motivated by just, trying to escape from everything in his past in England. Connor was motivated by trying to protect his village and his family. Arno is really driven by, he feels that he personally has made some very big mistakes in his life, and so he is joining the assassins, and he is going on this quest to kind of try and make that right, which is interesting. It's a very difficult motivation to pull off, particularly in a video game type environment, because video games are all about, very external, active events. Go here, do this, fight this guy, kill that person, run through this burning building. But it's
feel
one we don't
guilty
really
about that thing that happened years ago.
Exactly.
That's not really a thing. That's not really.
Yeah, it's not really something that necessarily translates easily to gameplay objectives. Press X to feel bad about your childhood failings is not really a thing that most people, I think, want to play in their video games. But it's certainly a very universal and fundamental element of the human condition. I mean, everybody has things in their past that they're not proud of, and hopefully we all try to make amends for those as much as we can. And so it's interesting to be able to explore that in an Assassin's Creed game, where typically we have a lot more action-oriented, fight the bad guy, save the world kind of motivations, and to kind of take that and bring it more internal and make it more about the character himself, I think is a really interesting opportunity.
Yeah, it's something I feel like previous Assassins probably could have done a bit more of. Our assassins traditionally are pretty headstrong, and they're set on their path, and they could do with some reflection on the things that they've done. I think it's funny because I think actually that's part of the reason that I enjoy the storyline of Revelation so much, is because that's the first time that Ezio starts to question what he's doing.
Absolutely.
And starts making mistakes, and then acknowledging those mistakes and understanding that he has to make up for them.
Absolutely, and that's very much something that we're trying to explore with Arno. And a big part of that is that a big part of his character is that he, while he certainly respects and admires the assassins and believes in the creed, he doesn't necessarily blindly follow it as like a religion the way some of our previous characters have done. And admittedly, that's probably more in the supporting cast. You see that than our main characters, but so he's definitely he's a questioner. He's not one who's just going to do things the way the bosses say they should be done just because that's what the bosses say it's always been. He's one of those people who's always like, well, is there a better way? Is there a new way? Is there a reason why we do it this way, or is this just something that we've kind of allowed to accumulate into the weight of tradition?
I'm also, obviously, the other big thing with regards to Unity that has obviously been revealed is the setting. And the French Revolution. Can you give us a little bit of insight into maybe why that was picked, and sort of how maybe it's a catalyst for some of the stuff we might see?
But I do think the French Revolution is a setting that the brand's fans have been clamoring for a very long time. I think it's one that is really wonderfully set up to showcase and highlight the classic dichotomy between the assassins and the Templars, ultimate freedom versus ultimate control, and also to show that either of their philosophies, really, if taken too far, are ultimately not very good for the human race as a whole and society in general. It's too much freedom leads to anarchy, too much control leads to slavery, and it's the French Revolution very much showcases that, as you see, the old hidebound monarchy that was very autocratic and dogmatic being overthrown by this initially very idealistic and well-meaning group of people who, through various very, very complicated series of events ended up becoming little better than the people they replaced, and the whole system swings violently between totalitarianism and almost complete anarchy several times over the course of the revolution. So it really, I think it really resonates very strongly with the themes that we were trying to go with in this particular story, and also just, the themes of the brand as a whole.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned actually the themes of the brand, because that comes up a lot of the time, and more recently in the last few Assassin's Creed games, it's sort of like the idea of exploring that gray area, as it were. And it's like, so you're not in the territory where, look, the Templars are bad guys and like the Assassins are good guys. It's like there's always sort of like some sort of overlap. It's like both have exhibited, ideals and values and desires for good. It's just a case of the way they go about them. And I personally feel like the French Revolution is probably as good a place as any to be able to showcase some of that, at least in specific characters. And there's a wealth of supporting characters.
There's a pretty good sized supporting cast, and so that's very much the goal, and we certainly hope that that's what people will take away from it when they actually play the game.
Let's go on to co-op, because obviously one of the things that was revealed as well at E3 was co-op, which got quite a bit of buzz. You wrote Unity. The co-op story, how does that fit in with the single player?
So the co-op story is very much more about the assassins as a whole, as an order, as a group, whereas the main story is very much focused on Arno and the people around him and his story and their interactions and how that affects these people's lives. The co-op is where we wanted to show off a little bit more of that traditional AC kind of historical tourism that a lot of the fans like. So that's where you're going to see a lot more of the big iconic events of the French Revolution. A lot more of the iconic characters show up there. One of the driving goals for the single player was to make this a story that is set in the French Revolution, but is not necessarily about the French Revolution in the way that, say, Assassin's Creed 3 was very much about the American Revolution, and you had things like, Connor leading revolutionary troops at the Battle of Lexington, or participating in Paul Revere's ride. So we wanted to make the French Revolution more of a historical and thematic backdrop without necessarily having to shoehorn Arno and secret assassin and Templar conflict into all these major events, which, obviously we are going to hit on a lot of the iconic events, and you're going to see them from the perspective of the assassins, and you're going to see some elements of the secret war that was going on behind the scenes of the French Revolution. But we wanted to keep some of that idea of the historical tourism, and so a lot of that is what you will end up seeing in the co-op.
Like, the thing that I find I think people are getting confused about, though, too, is the way the co-op missions fit into the single-player story, because you're always playing as Arno in the co-op missions. So from what you're saying, it's more about those big set pieces and the Brotherhood itself at the time, and I guess Arno's relationship with that.
Yes. Yeah, and so you are always perceiving yourself as Arno when you're playing the co-op, and the other player, everyone in the co-op mission sees themselves as Arno, and that's just an artifact of the nature of the reconstructed memories in the new Animus, which we're calling Helix. So the reason why you see yourself as Arno and the other characters as other assassins is tied into the nature of the Helix product and the way that the genetic memory is being accessed in Unity, which is a little bit different than it has been in previous AC games.
Okay, so at this point, just going to remind people that obviously if you haven't, there will be annotations and links in the description to all of the E3 videos that came out. We had a ton of content come out of E3 concerning Unity, so definitely go check out the various channels, and we'll give you the social media links at the end again if you need pointing in that direction. One thing that did come out of, and we mentioned Luma, one thing that did come out of his interview with Alex Amancio was the murder mysteries kind of thing that's going to be happening in in the game. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can talk a little bit about that, but that was mostly the bailiwick of one of the other writers on the project. So bear in mind that this is all secondhand. The way we divided up the writing team on this project was, rather than a traditional one lead writer through whom all other writing content is funneled, each writer is given sort of ownership over their own section of the game. So mine was the single-player story of Arno. We have another very talented writer named Carrie Young who is writing the co-op missions, and Russell Lees is writing all of the additional side content, the 1,000 Stories of Paris, as we're calling it, so that including the murder mysteries and various other side activities that have always been a big part of these games. So the murder mysteries are... basically, they're kind of drawn out activities that you can do as you're just sort of wandering around Paris. They're a little bit looser in structure than traditional missions. You know, a traditional Assassin's Creed mission, like an assassination contract, would be you go to the pigeon coop, you get the contract, it says, go here, kill this guy. You are considered to be in a mission while you're doing that, and either you succeed at the mission and the mission is done and resolved, or you fail the mission and you have to try again or abandon the mission. The murder mysteries are set up a little bit more loosely, so what'll happen is as you're wandering around Paris, you might hear people talking in the crowd, or you might just stumble across on your own a crime scene, just a dead body somewhere in an alley or in a street or in a house. And then you kind of have an opportunity to use your your assassin vision, your eagle vision, your special sensory powers that assassins have to kind of look around and find the clues that maybe the gendarmes might have missed, or that other people would have overlooked, and then you can sort of follow those clues like a trail of breadcrumbs, and ultimately, if you find all of them, it will lead you to one or more suspects. You can interrogate those suspects and find out if they have alibis, look for holes in their stories, and then ultimately accuse the person that you think is the killer of the crime. And if you get it right, then you complete the mission and you get a reward.
So wait, is there like a button for you? You press and you go, J'accuse!
Basically, yes. I don't know if it is literally called the J'accuse button, but I will see if I can I will see if I can get that into the UI before the game ships.
I can see that big really Press X to You're gonna need a new shirt.
I'm totally going to be doing just that.
J'accuse!
I eagerly await the YouTube montages of just 7 minutes of Arno pointing at every single person in the game, shouting J'accuse!
But what happens if you're wrong?
Well, I think we should probably save some of those for when people actually get the game and get a chance to play it and find out for themselves.
So you've been set a task, listeners. Very interesting. I'm actually really excited to hear that Carrie and Russell are working on the project as well, because Carrie done a bunch of work writing the Animus database entries, along with the actor who portrays Sean.
Yeah, she did a fantastic job of that on Assassin's Creed 3.
Yeah, and so we got a lot of comments from our fans and stuff talking about how much they enjoyed reading them. And of course, Russell wrote the DLC for AC3.
Yes, the Tyranny of King Washington.
Yeah, Tyranny of King Washington, which was amazing actually. All three episodes are great. Such great gameplay mechanics too.
Okay, so just wanted to ask one more thing before we kind of wrap it up, and that was we've mentioned the French Revolution. Obviously, you've talked about Paris, and can you talk to some of the areas of Paris that players are going to be able to see and interact? I mean, we've seen some of like the great landmarks already in the demos in E3, but are there any other things players can look forward to that you can?
All of them. We have the city of Paris is the largest single city that we have ever done for an Assassin's Creed game. I believe, and you'll have to double check this with the world team to make sure that I've got my numbers right, but I believe the last quote I heard was that it is something like 50% again as large as the entire frontier.
Whoa.
In AC3.
Wow.
I think that's right. I'm not 100% sure, but it is very, very large, and it is the densest world we have ever done in an AC game. Being on a next-generation platform gives us unbelievable abilities to have very dense crowds running around the city. I'm just playing the pre-release builds, or things even before the real optimization passes and like the serious artwork got in. Like, it feels like a real populated city in a way that a lot of previous games haven't necessarily. Like, it always kind of feels like there's 20 people on this street and 20 people on that street. Paris is dense. There is just a massive amount of content to see. There's a massive amount of architecture. I believe they've already spoiled the fact that we now have seamless interior and exteriors all throughout the city. Not necessarily every single building, but there are no more load times between going into a building and going out of a building. So that alone opens up so many new opportunities for evading guards. I've had fantastic moments where I'm running from guards and I just dive through someone's balcony and there's someone in the kitchen chopping vegetables for that night's stew, and they look like, "Hey, what are you doing in here? Sorry," and just out the window again, and the guards.
I'm sorry,
it was him.
And so both banks of the river are just packed to the gills with stuff to see and stuff to do. It's a massive, incredibly dense, and incredibly beautiful world.
I know, just based off obviously community reaction, but obviously what we saw as well at E3, it just looked huge and just a living, breathing city. And like you mentioned as well, and I believe one of the dev blogs talks about this with the interiors. It's like, that's a whole new dimension of gameplay, right? Whereas before, in previous games, you could maybe go through and you'd have a bit of a scripted sequence through a building, through an interior, and then out the other side.
Or you'd have a loading screen followed by a cutscene, followed by a loading screen that puts you back out on the street. And we've got some really impressive transitions and stuff in this game, and just to be able to walk from anywhere in the city straight to the Cathedral of Notre Dame and just walk right in through the front doors and see that incredibly gorgeous, beautiful interior, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It's extremely impressive and extremely exciting for us as well. That's pretty much it. And with that, I'd like to say a big thank you to Travis for joining us.
Absolutely, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you on the internet should they want to...
I am pretty much a technological Luddite, and I don't really have much of an internet presence. Not really, no.
Haha. That's actually very good. That's good news for me. Because, honestly, sometimes I come into work and it's like, what has Darby said today? What did Ash do now on Twitter?
No, I pretty much keep myself to myself, so...
Fair enough. Well, I can hear Tumblr now going, no! Yeah. We wanted to pester him with questions now. Okay, so there you go. Travis does not have much of a social media presence, but Gabe does.
I do.
So harass Gabe with all of your questions about Assassin's Creed Unity. He loves that. He lives for it.
Where can we find you on the internet?
So I got a Twitter account, twitter.com/UbiGabe, or @UbiGabe works. Probably even better. We'll leave it at that one, I think.
You can reach Gabe on Twitter. As for Assassin's Creed, obviously you can find Assassin's Creed on Twitter @Assassin's Creed, all one word. You can also find that on Facebook. That's Assassin's Creed. If you look for it, you should see the verified tick next to that. AC Initiates, you can find us on Twitter @AC Initiates. That's all one word. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/AC Initiates. And I'm EscoBlades on Twitter. So yeah, you can pester either myself or Gabe about stuff, and we can pass them on to Travis.
We'll go and pester him at his desk is what we'll do. Yeah. That's definitely, we'll team up.
Well, it's good because it gives us the chance to go find out more secrets. Then we can decide what.
That's a fact.
Right. Thank you for listening as always. Take care, stay safe, and bye for now.